Okay. Um, Tonight we are going to do a bunch of work on some user-facing kind of big features that are coming up in XDividend, and that is around portfolio tracking. So in XDividend, you can or you will be able to enter in all of the securities that you own in your portfolio, and you will then be able to see things like your gain and loss, your total return, including the dividends paid. And in order to do that, there's a couple different pieces to this. So stocks have the potential to split. Two big recent ones, Apple and Tesla, both split recently. So we need to be able to, if you tell us that you bought a stock a couple of years ago or before a split, we need to be able to take that position or that set of shares that you bought and appropriately calculate the split, and then actually calculate your gain or loss. And we also need to do that so that we can appropriately calculate the dividends that you were paid based on the date that you purchased them. All right. So we're going to go ahead and do a bunch of that work and see where we get. So some background on this. In XDividend, we have a couple of different objects that we're going to be working on. So a user can have multiple portfolios in the app. You can use this to organize, say you have a Robinhood account and a Schwab account, or a retirement account, those sorts of things. You can track all of those individually. So, a portfolio here, this is a representation, relatively straightforward. It has an object on it, or a property on it, called gain loss. And so gain loss, just up above it, has a couple of useful pieces on there. Cost basis, right? Meaning how much did you pay for this portfolio? What the current value is. So this is the taking all of the shares that you own at the different prices and adding them all up, right? The percentage change, meaning your difference between the percentage between your cost basis and your current value. And then finally, the value change, which is essentially just your cost basis, the difference between your cost basis and your current value, right? So we then have this notion of a position, and a portfolio can have any number of positions, and a position represents a certain point in time in which you purchased a certain number of shares. So we need a symbol, a ticker symbol. We need the number of shares that you purchased, the total cost, the cost per share, which then we can calculate your cost basis. The position also has a gain and a loss. So if you think about it, right, if you buy shares of a stock one day and then you buy shares of a stock on another day, both of those positions can have a unique gain or loss, right? Whether the stock, based on whether that security went up or down. And then there is this concept of dividend return, which means what was your cost basis for purchasing this, right? And this cost basis and this gain loss cost basis are going to be the same. So this, we might need to refactor this out a little bit. And then dividends paid, right? This tells you the full amount of dividends that were paid to you based on the date that you purchased it and whether you owned it on or before the X date of a given dividend, right? So we have these core items and these core objects. Some of them are wired in. So for example, you can ask for a portfolio and get the gain and loss for that portfolio. And obviously the position, you can do that as well, right? I've already worked on that. And if we take a look, I have, or the way that I've done this is just a simple function. Calculate gain loss. And I've written tests for these, right? Pretty important. And so what calculate gain loss does, it says, hey, you give it a list of positions. You give it a list of quotes, and then it calculates that information for you. And so if you call our API, you can get that information. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, and we will see how that works. Okay, so if I ask for a, portfolios, right, I can see that, see if I have a portfolio. In this change object here is a gain loss, right? So I'll be able to get the cost basis, the percent change, the current value, cost basis, percent change, value change, and the value change, right? So if I do this, oh, I need a token. We might have to get ourselves a token here from our app. Okay, let's do that so that we can actually run against our service here. Let's see here. We might have to get this token. And I'm just doing this off screen so that I don't leak anything potentially sensitive, although I don't think I have anything sensitive in here. Running against the test server. Let's go ahead and run this. And see what we get. We should get a token here pretty easily. Okay, so let's take a look and see if this token will do the trick. No, that did not do the trick. Oh, you know what? I've got these things wrong. So the issuer is this. Com dot that, and I think that's the subject. That may be the wrong, I might have the wrong user ID, but let's see if this works okay. Nope, that's the wrong user ID as well. Okay, let's get the right user ID here. So we will go into our console here, and I'll actually show you what we've got. This will be kind of interesting for folks to see. One of the things that I haven't talked about much is I'm trying to be privacy conscious and not take or get any information that I don't need. And because I'm using sign-in with Apple, I'm not requesting any actual user information in that process. I have no idea who you are. So if we go ahead and look, and this is my staging environment, but it looks exactly the same in production. If I go and look in Firestore and I look at the data, right, which is our main database, and I look in the SIWA, sign in with Apple, I don't have anything about you. I don't have an email or anything like that. So all of this is, I've tried to, again, not capture any data I absolutely do not need. And that way, I don't know who you are or what you own or what you do. So, okay, we have a token. This token has the right user and has hopefully the correct everything. No. Okay, what am I missing? Probably that key. How does that key work? Okay. There we go. That looks like it's processing. Okay, great. So we now have a valid token to work with for tonight. And we got a response back. So this is my test portfolio. Cost basis is $2,000. Percent change, current value. So let's go ahead and get all portfolios with positions. And this will show us everything we've got, right? ID and name. And then we can actually see what we have in this shares, cost per share, purchase date. And in here we can get the change, right? And this is cost basis, percent change, current value, value change, right? So if we pull this and we actually run our server, we'll see some useful stuff. All right. So as you can see, and it would be helpful if I put in the symbol, in this test or fake portfolio, I have two different sets of positions in Apple. I purchased them on the same day, and I bought 10 shares of one, 10 shares of another, both at $100, right? And so that means my cost basis is the shares times the cost put together, and then these are the actual numbers. And you'll notice that I can calculate the gain or loss on any of the actual positions, right? And these numbers will add up to, the entire portfolio's numbers, right? So all of this means, and I'm just doing this to show you that the math is relatively simple, but being able to do the math at each of the levels, right, at both a position level, right, as well as a portfolio level is important. And why is this important? So for investors, let's say you purchased you have two positions, different positions in a different stock, and maybe your timing was good on one and the stock had gone up since then, but your timing on the other wasn't great, so it had gone down. If you say go to sell some of that stock, right, and you want to, for example, save yourself some money on your taxes, at least in the U.S., if you choose, you want to be able to choose to sell a specific position. And in this case, right, you want to be able to look at your positions and say, oh, have I maybe lost any money on on one of these positions and sell it, right? So, the app will allow you to see the change or the gain loss on a per position basis, right? Or rolled up at a portfolio basis, okay? Now, this is not complete and potentially inaccurate. So we need to fix that. And the reason that it's inaccurate is because Apple stock, so I said I purchased this stock essentially last year, January 1st. Apple stock last year, if I'm not mistaken, split. So what does that mean? 41-year stock split history. Yeah. So February of, oh no, sorry, 8/31. So on August 31st, Apple did what is called a 4-to-1 split. So what that means is for every share that I owned prior to 8/31, I now have 4 shares rather than just 1. And accordingly, the price also goes way, way, way down. Now, in this case, the numbers don't necessarily line up or make it look weird. But say I purchased this stock, and I'll change this to this. Say I purchased this stock around, $300. If I were actually looking at this position, it would show that I was negative, right? Because it would say, oh, you bought a share at $300, but now the stock is only at 100 some, right? And that's because I'm not reflecting the fact that actually I don't have 1 share or 10 shares at $300. I now have 4 times as many shares that I had, right? And the cost basis is different, right? Because of that. So we need to actually reflect that information. And so in order to do that, we will set ourselves up with the position that reflects that. So in order to do that, I have we need to set a mutation. And so what we will do is we will say, I'm doing a new position. The portfolio ID is this. All right. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put myself like in that bad position, right? And I'm going to show you like the situation that we get ourselves into. So the portfolio ID is this. We're going to say we bought shares of Apple. Our cost per share, let's say it's $200. Let's say we bought the number of shares we bought. Say we bought 10 shares, and the all-important purchase date. So we need to put this such that it's before 8/31, so August 31st. So let's just say we bought this in... we bought this August 8th. And is that the right format? So, I can't remember if it's year, month, date. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Year, month, date. So I'm going to add this position. We can validate that it works. String, yep, because that's a double value. Okay, so let's mutate this. Let's send this in. Okay, so we have now put ourselves in that, potentially bad position where we bought something and it's actually in the money, meaning it gained value. But if we look at it here, it's going to say, whoa, we lost a ton of money, right? Because again, it doesn't know that these shares that I purchased, this really should say I own 40 shares at a cost of 200 divided by 4, meaning I really bought those shares for $50, right? So we need to, one, get that information, right? We need to get the information about the stock splitting. And two, we have to factor that into our calculations, okay? So we're going to do this. Hopefully we'll get through all of it. So I don't know if we will, but we're going to go through the whole process of pulling data from my data provider, who is IEX Cloud, or one of my data providers, IEX Cloud. And we're going to write the API endpoint. We will pull that in. We will store it in Firestore because that data doesn't change and we need to cache it. And then try to calculate that information. But first, I think what I'd like to do is start with the math, because that may take a little bit of time. So maybe we'll do that first. So what does that mean? There's a couple ways that we could go about this. We could add a list of splits here, which will represent the fact that a stock has split. And so when we calculate the gain loss, we can take those splits into account. We could also potentially modify or return a new list of positions that are what's called split adjusted, okay? Which I think that is actually the tact that I'm going to take, because it's nice to have this. I feel like if I add splits in here, it's really just going to be doing too much, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something kind of interesting. We're actually going to develop this as an extension function on a list of position. And we're going to say split adjusted. And let me make sure that terminology makes sense in the financial world. Split adjusted, and I'll show you what I'm looking at. Split adjusted refers to how historical stock prices are portrayed in the event that a company has issued a stock split for its shares in the past. When reviewing price data, split adjusted data will reflect the increase in price as if there had been no split in the shares. Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, this is just for me. So as long as I know what this means, we're good. So the idea is basically we can say on a list of positions, we can say split adjusted. We will need to pass in the splits or the history of the splits. And then what we'll get out is a new list of positions that have been appropriately adjusted. I do not currently have any data type to represent a split, but we can temporarily go ahead and make one for the purposes of working this out. So what do we get? Let's take a look at what we get, or what information we will have to represent a split. Splits. Okay. So a couple things here. We're gonna have a declared date, which is a string. We're going to have a description, right? And this is also a string. So what this string will represent, right, is it'll look something like, in the case of Apple, it'll look like that, 4-to-1 split or something like that, right? So it's just kind of like a textual representation of the split itself. The most important thing is going to be the ratio. And so this is going to tell us, this is going to help us calculate the new price and the amount of shares you're supposed to have. And there's also from factor. We'll make this a long, even though it's probably okay as an integer, 2-factor long. Let's take a look. Oh, these are going to be strings. String. Okay. So the ratio is the split ratio. It's the inverse of the number of shares that a holder of the stock would have after the split. Okay, so what this means is that a ratio of 0.5 is equal to a 2-for-1 split, meaning that you will have double the shares that you had before the split occurred, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that should be correct. Okay, let's... Well, actually, let's... where did we get that Apple stock splits? Let's take a look at that and make sure that makes sense. Stock split history... 8/31/2020, 4-to-1. So basically, a 4-to-1 split is going to be 0.25, right? Okay. Apple just announced its 5th stock split in history. Yeah, and also one of the things, one of the major reasons that companies do this is because once their price has gone too high, it kind of seems out of reach for certain people. With most brokerages allowing you to buy fractional shares, doesn't really matter, but it's more of a optional. It's more of a mental thing than anything else. August 24th, investors will receive 3 additional shares, right? So that's that 4-for-1 split. And the stock price would be divided by 4, right? 7-for-1 split, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So what we really care about is this number ratio. When we are checking split adjusted, we need to take in a list of stock splits. And we're taking in a list because say you've been an Apple shareholder for many, many years, you will have experienced a number of splits, right? Over time. So we need to take all of those into account. And we'll do that in our test. We'll check for that. So now we should be able to write the test for this. So we already have I already have a test for calculating the gain and the loss and the difference. And so let's go ahead and give this a shot. Calculate split adjusted. So in this case, right, I'm going to have a holding or a position, which is going to be this. ID is null. What else is in a position? Our symbol. We are concerned with Apple. we said we bought this at, let's call it $200 a share. Let's say we purchased 10 to make it a nice round number. What else are we missing? We don't care about the change. We don't care about the dividend return. Purchase date is important. We purchased this on some date prior to August 31st. So we purchased it on that date. Okay. Now we have a split. So Apple's stock splits. And we're going to make this that. Well, no, we're not going to add that because we're just going to assume that we're smart enough to not pass it the wrong thing. So the declared date, this doesn't really matter. Let's just say they declared it the month before. Description, this is going to be 4-to-1 split. That doesn't really matter either. The ratio really matters. The ratio is 0.25. So again, the inverse of the inverse of what it was, or of the split. From factor is 1. And the to factor is 4, right? So that should be a 4-to-1 split. One thing that is missing here is the X date, meaning what date did you need to have it purchased by in order to actually get the split. 1/7, is the ratio, or sorry, 1/4 is the ratio, 0.25, from 1 to 4. And in our case, the X date is going to be, let's call it, we had to own it by 0710. Again, these numbers don't really matter. Like, they're not like historically accurate, but they're at least accurate so that I can write a test for it, right? So, okay. So in this case, when we're done with this, we should have 40 shares, and the cost should then be, for those shares, should then be $100. So we should see a gain instead when we recalculate the new price, right? All right, so we're going to say list of position dot split adjusted and list of splits. Okay. So this should give us back what? Equals this is going to give us back a double the number of shares. So this is going to give us back 40 shares. And our cost per share is going to be only 50. Because our cost goes down by the same amount that it's split for, in theory. Even though we paid $200 for it, right, we got more shares out of it. So, all right. So let's write the code for this. We're not going to take into account the date yet. Let's just get the math right. Well, yeah, no, we do need to do that. So we're going to say, and we're going to kind of try and do this functionally. We're going to say this dot. We need to basically go over each position. And we need to say if position, the purchase date is before, well, it could have gone through multiple splits too. So first thing we always need to make sure is that the splits are ordered from back to front. So we're gonna do this here, but basically if someone passes in a big list of splits and they're not, ordered properly, we need to make sure that they're in the proper order, meaning oldest to newest. So we're gonna do that splits dot sorted by it dot, well, that needs to be sorted by when it happened. Okie dokie. Then so what are we going to do here? So for each position, we're going to go through each of the splits and then adjust that position based on what it has. So we're going to say sorted splits dot map not null. And so what I'll do is I will only return, that's not going to work. I was thinking I was going to only return a split if it was performed afterwards, but that doesn't quite get me the same thing, right? But what I really want to do is I want to almost do a sum by. Functionally, I know that there's a operator for this. But I'm not sure what in theory is the best way to do that. Because essentially, right, what we're looking at is we want the previous item passed into the new one, which is essentially a reduce, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So accumulation and the split. Accumulates value starting with the first element and applying operation from left to right to current accumulator value in each element. Right, so I think that's what we want. So this will then return a position. And so basically we're saying if accumulated. But I don't want to return a stock split, so I think I have this backwards. So I want to do a position dot for each stock split. So maybe it's not reduce. Is it fold? We could probably figure this out functionally later. Yeah, we'll just figure this out functionally later. So we're going to basically say, we're going to, there is a way to do this functionally. I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to copy this and we're going to return split adjusted. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to say sorted splits dot for each. For every split, we need to check if. Okay, so now we can say if the positions dot purchase dates is before the ISO date or the before the X date, right? This means that a split occurred and we need to recalculate the position. And so in this case, we'll update split adjusted. And we'll do that based on its current value. So split adjusted is going to be a new position. Actually is going to be split adjusted dot copy. And we're going to update a couple of things. We're going to update the number of shares. So the number of shares is going to be split adjusted dot shares times 1 over the ratio. Right? So if we have 10 shares, we're going to do, 1 over 4. No. 1, the ratio, what is the ratio again? One, it's the inverse. So really what we are, so it's really 1 minus that, 1 minus the ratio. No. All right, we need a pad and paper here for some basic algebra. So basically what we're looking at is we have 10. And, well, we're really getting 3 shares out of it. Wait a minute. 1 divided by... Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So really, yeah, 1 divided by the ratio. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, the number of shares. So if we have 10 shares, and we do, 1 over the ratio, the inverse, right? That's the number of shares. Okay, I was going to say, I thought I had that right. The cost per share is also going to be split adjusted. And that's essentially just going to be times the split ratio. So it's going to look like you purchased that amount of shares for only $50. So it'll be 200. So 200 times 0.25 is 50. Yeah, so then we're just going to reassign that and return it. So this should do the trick here. All right, so let's check our tests. So we're also going to, oh yeah, we already wrote it, 40. So we should have 40 shares at $50. So let's see if we did it right. Nope, what'd we miss? Expected 40, actual 10. Split adjusted. Copy. Okay, maybe our dates are off. I purchased it on the 8th, which is... Oh, yeah, I got these dates reversed. So this, let's say it was declared here, and I purchased it here. You have to purchase it before the split date, which, yeah, 40.0. Okay. And that's also a double. So that's just a type issue. Okay. So that works. I really don't like this. I really want to write this in the functional manner that it should be written in. Let's figure this out. I really think this is a fold. What is a running fold? So I think what we want is a fold. I'm no functional programmer, but I'm pretty sure that's what we want. So the initial is going to be split adjusted. So this is really going to be position dot copy. And then we're going to be passing it a function that has the accumulator and the iterable. So this is going to be the position and the split, right? Why doesn't it like that? Required position. Change the signature of the lambda. Nope. Hang on. Fold. The initial is position.copy. And then the operation is an accumulator R and T that returns R. Yeah. Yep, there we go. Oh, is this just complaining that I have? Yeah, okay. This is just complaining I didn't return anything. So, this is now this. This is that. And this is the accumulated. And so this is just returning this, else return that, right? So that is the functional way of doing it. Let's run the test again. I think that's the way we do it. Hey, look at that. Cool. Okay, so for those, for the non-functionally inclined, and I'm certainly not an expert, what fold does is it takes an initial value, which is our position.copy, while it's iterating over our splits, and then it's always passing the previous one that it was given to it to the next item, right? So the first run, it has the initial value and the first split. The second run, it has whatever value was returned from here and the second split. So now let's test this with multiple splits and see what we get. And we're going to make the numbers a little easier. Well, no, we don't have to make the numbers that easier. So we're going to say split 1 and split 2. And let's just say the stock split twice. What would we get? So let's just say it's split the next month as well. 4-to-1 split, same as before. So that means we're going to have 160 shares, and it's going to look like we bought it for $12.50. Right? I hope so. Yes, okay. And let's just, oh, no, I didn't run that test because I didn't run the whole, let's run the whole test. Okay. Let's break the test just to see if it fails. Right, 160, yep, all right. So then, the only other test that we really need to write is if our date math is correct. Adjusted multiple before date. And so let's say the first split was prior to the purchase date. So the first split was before I purchased the stock. And we'll rename these appropriately. Right, so before and after the purchase, this should only pick up one of the splits, and it didn't. So, oh, it did. Okay, our type coercion. Okay, so it looks like our math is correct. So what this means is that we can be passed, if we have a list of positions and we have a list of the splits that we know about, we can calculate what the new position is currently. So we're making good progress. Let's keep going. The next thing we need to do is we need to actually get a list of splits for a given stock. and we will get that from one of the data providers I have, i.e. xCloud. So let's take a look at how I do API calls. And that is with what I'm guessing many of you are familiar with, retrofits. So let's go ahead and implement that. I use suspension functions, coroutines with my API client. And I also use a library called Ether or Ethernet from Slack. And this is a really cool pluggable sealed type for retrofit responses that breaks things down into different types of failures and errors. And I really love data classes and sealed types for kind of representing potential success and failure states. And so this is a really, really, really awesome library. It is a bit limited because I believe it only works with suspension functions. And there are some gotchas depending on your types. But there are a couple issues in here for kind of making people aware of that. I've been meaning to maybe help. There's an issue here on creating a recipe sample subproject, and so I might see if I can help out with that. But this is the library that I use. So let's go ahead and write something for this. So actually our stock split that we had here was pretty darn close to what we wanted. So we'll bring this over and we will call this IEX stock split because that's where it's from. It's got a declare date, an X date, a description, ratio, from factor, to factor. It's got a key, which we're going to call symbol because that lines up better with what is in our... Well, actually, we don't even care about that property because we're going to know based on what we pass in. It's also got an updated field, which I don't really care much about. Do I care about that? No, I don't care about that. Okay, so that's that. We can probably put this back here because I don't like to mix and match. This IEX client is at a different module, and I don't necessarily like things like this leaking out of its module. If I can't help it, I have to write an extension function or two to convert. But I think that's a kind of small price to pay for kind of keeping the modules clean and separate. So what does this look like here? So it's a GET request. Its URL is stock symbol /split/range. And this range we actually use in a couple different places. You'll see here we have range. And I actually have range.iex parameter. I have basically an enum, right, that represents this range. So we can use that for grabbing different ranges of data if we want. So we're going to call this splits. We're going to pass in a symbol. And we're going to pass in a range as well. And this is going to return a list of, IEX stock splits, and we don't care about the error response itself. Okay, so this is roughly the API call that's going to be made. So in order to just test that, we can set this up, and do we even want to plumb this through? So the question is like, this is obviously going to be used internally to calculate returns, but it's probably worth even exposing it just as a query that the client can call, because in the app, we're probably going to want to be able to show a company's list of splits. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in between that we're going to need to do, right? We need to store it in Firestore so it's cached, and we can search for it, and we're not constantly calling this API, incurring charges. But we can at least write the query so that we can test this out. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to queries. There's a whole bunch in here. Where do we think it goes? It's not related to dividends. It's not dividend history. It's not about the broader market. Portfolios, watch list, search. We can just make a new one. Okay, so I'm using, as I've talked about before, GraphQL Kotlin. Splits query. This is going to take in a service of some kind, but we haven't actually written that service yet, so we will leave it out. Copy some of this stuff up. And this is going to return a list of stock split for a given symbol. Okay, so now we have to start to wire this through. Typically what I would do is first write kind of a caching layer for Firestore, and then I would write a service in the data module, but we're just going to skip the Firestore thing. We'll probably do the caching thing in another stream. I've done a bunch of streams on caching, so it's not super important. If you want to, see how I do caching, you can go to a previous stream if you'd like. Let's do this. Let's create a new service. It needs an IEX client. It's going to be a singleton. And it's going to have a suspension function called splits. It's going to take in a symbol. And in the future, it'll probably take in a range. But what is my... Oh, is it just called chart range? Is that what it is? Yeah. So this isn't... Oops. This isn't just a chart range, though. So let's just call this range because it's used for more than just that. And we will take in a range, which is our range. And we'll default it to 1 year if you don't pass it in. Okay, so then we're gonna do, so now we're gonna use the client, and I'm gonna show you how to use Ethernet and why I really like it. Where is stock split? This is in the wrong, this has got to be in here. And then this is going to rely on that module, which is fine. All right, so what does this look like? So it's a sealed type, and we're going to say return when the response equals IEX client dot splits. We're going to pass it the symbol and the range dot parameter. Okay, so then in here, you get to do this like branching, right? And so you can easily handle the different types of failures, whether it's network, unknown, HTTP, whatever, to your liking, or you handle the success. I do this a little differently just because I don't need the granular capabilities in here like this is. I do something like this. And in here, we just return empty list. And in here, we need to return response dot, and I'm going to make an extension function, right, to convert this. So this is going to be internal fun. This is going to be a list. Actually, I typically do this, and I do 2 splits. I'll do this, and I'll say return. Right, so this does that, and then I'll also say list of IEX stock split 2 splits. List of stock split, and then I can just do return this dot map it dot to split, right? And then this 2 splits. All right, there we go. The other thing that I do is I have an extension function on the logger. What is that extension function? Let's look at one of our other services, logger.response error. That's right. And I'll show you what this does in a minute. But this is this actually goes deeper, right? And looks at the type of failure and then logs a different error message and information based on the actual failure, right? So at a high level, there's not really much I can do to recover from this, right? So I at least need to log it, but there's nothing I can actually do about it. So I just return an empty list. And in this case, right, I just return, or I have a special logger that basically when I'm looking in my logs, if I see failures like these, I'll know, okay, this is exactly, oh, this is for this endpoint, and also this is the type of failure, error or failure, right? And you'll see I do this pattern all over the place, right? Like this returns a nullable object if there was an error, right? This sort of thing. Although this should be this, and I should return null, not empty, because that'll actually signal an error versus signaling that there are no splits, right? Because not all stocks obviously have splits. All right, this can be wired up here. So this can now say, I gotta pull this in, split service. Oops. Symbol, and we'll just use the default of 1 year for now. We'll probably add a parameter on here to grab more in the future, but this should be good. What else? We need to... Nope, that's a query. It should all be wired up. Okay, so let's run our server again, and we should see the splits query and see what we get. Oh, it failed. Firestore connection. Failed to inject value of split service. It should pick that up. Why? Oh, that's right. I have to wire this up. I do some... You don't always have to do this. Typically you don't, but because of some of the way that I'm doing this, I have to kind of manually wire this up. But I will work on fixing that later. I partly do it because I get compile time updates. Stock split is not a valid graph type outside of the supported packages. Right. Data.models. This needs to be in the appropriate package, which is data.models, so that it gets picked up from GraphQL. So I have, when Kotlin GraphQL, when you start it up, you have to give it a set of packages so that it knows like the response types. And so models is one of its packages that it scans. So I just had to move that class over. So hopefully that'll be the end of that. Fix these, remove that. Okay. So we now should have a query called, sometimes the auto completion. We should have a query called splits. We can pass it a symbol. And we should get two-factor, from-factor, ratio, declare date, x date, and description. No, okay. Something wrong with our query? Status code 404. Okay, did we do something wrong with our URL? Stock symbol. Oh, I missed the stable. Okay. My bad. spin this up. So this should show us the 4-to-1 split for Apple that was done on 08/31. So if we go back to the canonical data or the various, an actual data thing, you'll see that there was a stock split, 4-to-1 split on 8/31. So we can go back further, right? We've only got our range set to a year. And so, we might change the query here to be able to set a range. I might do this in a batch job and just grab all the splits at once and then, run it every couple of days. I haven't really decided on that, but in this case, now that we have both a way to get this data as well as the ability to calculate it, we now have split adjusted data, so our portfolio data can be much more accurate. So that's probably where I'm going to leave it. We've been going for a little while. But yeah, thanks for joining. This was a good stream. We made a lot of good progress. If you got any questions, let me know as usual. And we'll probably do a couple more streams later this week and keep working on this and pick up right where we left off, right? So as I mentioned, we have to make this split adjusted part of the gain loss calculation, right? So we need to kind of wire these two functions together in the appropriate place. And then our API will be far more accurate. And then finally, we're going to do a very similar thing to this, right? Where if you give it a list of positions, we're going to calculate the dividends returned, which actually, let's take a look at that. Maybe I already did that. Dividend return is cost basis and dividends paid. Where does this actually get set? I don't actually think I set that. Yeah, I just put that on there. So this is the next thing, right? We actually have to loop over every position, and very similar to the splits, we need to calculate the actual return based on the dividends that we had, right? So that'll look very similar to this, and we'll do that in another stream. So I think that is it. Got a lot done, and we will do some more in the next stream, hopefully later this week.